Welcome to the Holistic Career Change Podcast, one-stop shop for everyone feeling stuck in their career and who are looking to identify, change, and succeed at their new fulfilling work. I'm your host, Vilma Oseita. Let's go. Happy New Year! How are you guys doing? My goodness, 2023, let's go. I don't know about you, but I adore the beginning of the year. There is just something so fresh and freeing and powerful and dreamy about new beginnings. There's just this hope in the air, you know? It's my favorite. So, today we have such a special guest on the podcast, my client, Nicole. I can honestly say, I was thinking about the year and I can honestly say that I won the lottery with my clients. Each of these women that I've featured on the podcast, and so many of them that are actually not even on the podcast, they are these most inspirational, strong, empathetic, gifted souls. And I see them as change makers who are here to create real impact, change the systems, introduce something that perhaps has not been introduced yet, but we've been calling that in as a collective. And they're here to make these heart-led contributions to the world. In spite of what industry they're transitioning into, not all of them are what I lovingly call as light workers. And it's honestly just such an honor to be supporting them on their paths towards remembering the purpose and then building their purpose-led lives. It's just the best. I just love what I do so much. This past year, you probably noticed I've decided to feature more of my clients on the podcast for a very specific reason. I remember myself back in what at this point feels like past life in finance and corporate, feeling such deep misalignment. And that misalignment was very painful. It was paralyzing. But above all, I just felt so alone with this, what sometimes it feels like a dark secret, a heavy secret. And that secret was me, in spite of what my life looked like from the outside in, I just didn't feel connected to this life, to the career that I had worked so meticulously in building. And there was a feeling of shame and disappointment and confusion. But above all, I just felt like the odd one out. Somehow, and I have no idea how, people around me at that point seemed to just be somehow carrying on and functioning, and none of them seemed too ecstatic or happy about the life, but they somehow managed to just adjust to the world, adjust to the rules that a lot of us were subjected to, or at least they seemed better adjusted than me. And that's how it felt to me. And obviously, you know, we can never know what fight someone is fighting in the depths of their heart and the soul. But when I was in that darker part of my evolution, I just had no access to stories about career change. Just none. I felt like I was the only one, as dramatic as it sounds, but I just felt like I was the only one going through it. And I even wasn't aware of many concepts of career change and the intricacies of this journey that I talk about now and that I learned about, that I studied about, that I share with you here on the podcast. It was lonely. And I know that I was so thirsty for stories about courageous people who decided to switch. And just hearing those stories would have kept my hope alive that perhaps it could be possible for me too one day. And I do believe the reason why my change ended up being so long is because I didn't have access to those examples of what's possible. And sometimes when I talk about this, right, that change, the dark night of the soul or dark night of the ego death, people who have not experienced it, this sort of rock bottom of sorts and that deep despair and that questioning of their life, some of them would often tell me like, Vilma, you sound a little bit like dramatic about this. And I'm like, fine. Like, I don't try to prove them differently, but them saying that just shows me that they have not experienced that sense of their lives seemingly falling apart and things not making sense anymore, and them feeling that sense of desperation and urgency to find alignment. And that's perfectly fine. Not everyone will go through that path. But honestly, the reason why it's so overwhelming and sometimes daunting is because it's not just about changing career. It's not that simple. It's about reconfiguring yourself and resetting your whole life. So if you are in that place right now, I know how isolating it can be, and yet you're not alone. And you can and you will find your alignment. You can and you will build your definition, whatever it is for you, of happiness, of freedom, of joy, of meaning. And these beautiful women like Nicole, who so generously decide to share their stories, are just like you. Especially Nicole. And I think about her story often because her journey towards finding that aligned career path at the first glance may seem super serendipitous, magical, and super fast. I would joke with her. I was like, you were quantum leaping through this journey. She didn't believe me, by the way. We laugh about this a lot. And it could be so easy to misjudge and just say that she's lucky, or it doesn't just happen to everyone, or it will never happen to me. And yet this magical year that Nicole has experienced is only the latest chapter of her book of life. So many chapters, most of the chapters leading up to this one, were of her hustling, surviving, just fighting the harsh circumstances, being a single mom, taking care of her two beautiful boys. One of them, by the way, was sick for many years, and her just relentlessly pushing forward, never giving in, never giving up. I'm in awe of her determination of tenacity. And probably, if she heard me say that, she would say, like, I have no other choice. For her, there was no other option just to work hard, be the caretaker. And that's the identity that she knew so well, and she was so good at it for the longest time. And in the conversation to come that you're about to hear, Nicole will share how the majority of her life, she just had no access to abundance, and she would even get triggered when people would remind her to think more positively or to remember to use law of attraction, because her life felt so far away from it, and she just didn't have space to ask herself questions about fulfillment. And she had even suppressed and denied some of her beautiful, powerful spiritual gifts that she has because she simply just had no time and energy and space for it, right? It felt what she called very woo for her, and her rational mind didn't accept that. So we talk about that. We also talk about how she did end up finding her aligned path. And honestly, her story is just extraordinary. I cannot wait for you to hear it. And she will also share what it actually feels like to be experiencing alignment with purpose, to be living and working in purpose. And that feeling is something she literally did not know was available for her before. And she just does such a beautiful job of describing it. I just love Nicole's story. She went through such a massive transformation, and she went from living in lack and this doing mode. I remember at the beginning of our coaching, we would talk a lot how she wanted to solve things with action. She's very active, and she thought the answer is always action, which is true in most cases, but also it's about her learning how to surrender and flow and co-create with life, which I think she's so good at right now. And the final point that I'd like to make is please give yourself a gift of listening to this episode till the end. Because my last question to every single career changer that I have on a podcast is the advice that they would give to their past selves or someone who is in that hard part of the career change journey. And I feel like it's just so reassuring to hear what someone who's done the work has to tell you, someone who's gone through the change has to tell you. And Nicole has done it. So use her as an inspiration, use her as an example of what's possible, and just decide that this could be your story too. And also, Nicole's laugh is the best. This is such a fun episode. I'm so excited to share our conversation. Enjoy. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited today to welcome a guest who's my client, Nicole, to the Holistic Career Change podcast. So, Nicole, hello.
Hello.
Okay, let's start by me asking you to introduce yourself a little bit so the listeners know who you are, where you're from. Just share whatever feels good to you.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Vilma. I'm Nicole, and I am a youthful 43 years old. I have lived in the Pacific Northwest region of the US my entire life, and I have my bachelor's of arts in the Spanish language. I achieved that with two small children. They are now 19 and 23, my sons. And then I have a 26-year-old stepson. Wonderful boys. None of them live at home anymore.
Mhm.
I also met the love of my life in my late 30s. So we were married just over 4 years ago. And I would say over the years, I've just had this wide array of professional roles. I was a social worker for first-time parents with resource barriers. And then I ended up moving into marketing, not really through intention, but through opportunity. So I just worked in marketing for years, and I was a single mom a lot of that time, had a sick child for a long while. So there's just a lot of hustle in my work choices. I have also worked for myself and I moved into the tech sector 3.5 years ago. And I am a coach for new hires. And we all know the tech sector is not doing awesome right now. And I'm also a photographer. So having said all of that, I will say there's also this deeper side to myself, which is I am intuitively and deeply connected to nature. I would say I'm an overall free spirit and kind of have an artist's view of many aspects of life. If you're into the intuitive world, I would call myself a clairsentient, which means I really experience intuition through physical feeling and through sensation. I'm a Virgo sun, a Libra moon, and a Leo rising, and I'm a manifesting generator in human design. So whether you believe in those models or not, those profiles describe me perfectly.
Yes,
So they're
especially the Virgo side.
Very much so. When the first time I read about manifesting generators, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so seen right now. And then lastly, I will just say I'm a friendly introvert. I like to be alone a lot, but I also am very friendly in social environments.
I love that. A friendly introvert. I never heard that before. I kind of need to, I need to borrow that. That's fantastic. I love it. Thank you so much. So I do love a good linear story. So I think what we will start with you, perhaps, if you don't mind, is really um, going back and kind of at that time where you and I connected. And I really want to share with the listeners something that I always tell you is like the first time we connected and it was the consultation call. And I remember you showed up on the call and I usually do politely read people's energies as an intuitive. And you came in and I was like, oh, how interesting. Before you even said anything, I was thinking, oh, it's like a healer, a coach, like, an intuitive, someone who like a witch who came to a consult. And I was like, oh, I wonder what kind of help she needs, So it's usually I have people from corporate, from tech world to your point. And then we started speaking and you were like, oh yeah, I work in tech. And I was like, hold on, what? You still work in that matrix in corporate world in tech? And you were like, yes, I do. And I remember just feeling such a stark like dissonance within me with the energy that you came in with and presented and just the light that you had and the world that you were currently still are, and we'll talk about that, living in. And I remember thinking, this woman must be like so tenacious, so stubborn, so hardworking for her to stay and to like still continue working in environments that are so misaligned with her soul and her energy. And I was so curious and in awe. And I was like, I want to learn more. How did you do it? And obviously, once we started speaking, I realized how, and I'm sure you'll share a little bit more with the listeners, but maybe let's start there. Talk to me about what led you to the point, right, of booking a call. What was your reality like then? Because I know that you have really great points to share about that.
Absolutely. I will just say before I get into that, when we met, I felt so seen right away. I felt an instant download between both of us. And I knew right away that I would be working with you because you just saw right through it. So I just want to acknowledge that as well. Yeah, so I guess I'll just set the stage for when I reached out to you. It actually all started last year on solstice because my children, I have only been an adult as a parent. Like I had my children so young. So they had moved out and they had stayed home a little bit longer because of COVID. So I had a little more time with them. And one moved to college, one moved out with his girlfriend. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so young and I am empty nested. So that was the first thing that happened. Then I will say I started to understand my story and my life and myself in a deeper way because I just didn't have this focus anymore or this busyness of focusing on my children as much. And I had all of this physical space in my home I had never had. And I started to look at the story of my life and the struggle. I was a single mom for a long time. And I would say there were times I had partnerships, but I was still emotionally a single mom. It wasn't until I found my husband that I found another parent for my children. So one of my children was sick for 6.5 years of that journey. And he's well now, but I can't even think of more distress than being a single mother, not having a safety net, not having a savings account, not knowing how you were going to go to work in the morning and take care of your child, making choices you never thought you'd make. And I became such a hustle person. Like everything was this cycle of scarcity and trying to keep up and never breaking even. And I became sort of a warrior. Like I just had to for a long time. So I will say, I'll to make a long story short, I will say that life just never really felt easy for me. So all of a sudden, there was alignment in my life, like health wise. I felt, when the kids moved out, I'm feeling great, and I feel like I'm on top of that. And my marriage and my relationship is wonderful, and my life is peaceful. And I feel like I really deeply know myself in a new way. And so I was understanding that this kind of struggle phase was over. And yet there was this huge piece in my life that was misaligned because I had built a career, I had built this part of myself out of what I could do, what I had to do, but never what I wanted to do. So all of a sudden I was like, there's this aching wound because I am not aligned in this part of my life. And it hurts more in some ways when everything else is aligned because you can see it more clearly. When everything is misaligned, it all hurts, right? You're like, of course this sucks. Everything sucks right now. But all of a sudden it was like, things are great. And when I go to work, I have no ambition here. It was scary to me as a very ambitious person. It was like, I don't have any goals or ambition in this world. My ambition is to leave. So before I contacted you, I had identified that I was feeling deeply envious of my friends that were aligned in career, regardless of where they were misaligned. Some of them were misaligned in other places, but it was like, if they had that alignment, I almost was burning. Like, oh, I wonder what that's like. I would love to have that. I wish I had that. And then I was hearing my intuitions. They say intuition is quiet. Well, it's not always quiet because like my intuition was screaming, Nicole, you have a purpose. There's something else. This is not for you. You have to listen. This is not for you. It was coming out everywhere. Like there was just all of these messages. So I went to a reading on solstice with this amazing reader here in my town, Felice. And I cried because I said, I don't know what to do about this part of this professional part of my life. And the message was, you need to believe that what you love to do and what brings you joy and what fills you up has power.
Oh, amen.
Oh, I'm gonna cry. Like, you need to believe it's not just a frivolous hobby. You're not just doing these things you love outside of work, as like, I don't know, as something foolish. It's your soul. And you absolutely need to believe that has and holds power. it resonated so deeply with me that I started to journal. I started to listen to every podcast. I started to do everything possible to try to realign this part of my life and listen. And I was really deeply immersed in my spirit and understanding that many things I had written off as just fun or leisure were actually things that really were probably the meaning of my life. And I went to the coast with my husband. I was sitting outside of the house we were staying in. There's no Wi-Fi. And I was, for the first time ever, trying to write down what I thought my purpose was. So I had found an activity to help me kind of dig through the pieces. And I did that. And then I wrote down my first ever idea at age 42 of what the purpose on this planet is
Love
for
it.
me. And I sat there and I was like, well, this sounds true. And this is real. I'm kind of already this, but like, what? Like, what do I do with this? It has nothing to do with what I'm doing to make money. And I do have to make money. And I just kind of felt baffled by it and proud of myself. And I walk in the house where I get Wi-Fi because there's no Wi-Fi outside the house. And I look at Instagram and the first thing I see is holistic career change. It's your post. And it was kind of like a lightning bolt. It was so clear it was a synchronicity, which my life at this point is a river of synchronicity.
Oh my God, we need to talk about that too.
I know, but it was like the beginning of, there had already been other things, but it was really where the momentum picked up. And so I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Who is this woman? And I remember pulling up the link to schedule and I felt scared.
Ooh, tell me why.
Yeah, because I had been living in a framework of pragmatism.
Mm-hmm.
It's not pragmatic, quote unquote, to contact a career change coach when you are relying on your income, when you feel like you're on a track, right? So, and I also was like, do I really want to do this? What if I show up and I'm like, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
I'm also a Virgo, keep that in mind. So if the Virgo profile is, you really like to know what to expect. You really like to know. So remember, I scheduled you out kind of far because I thought, well, I'm going to give myself like a month to see if I still want to show up.
I actually remember, it was a while back, and I do remember that your schedule came in and you were like scheduling in exactly a few weeks in, or maybe like almost a month. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay.
And I remember as it got closer, I knew I was supposed to meet you. I knew I was supposed to meet you. I knew I was supposed to do this. I knew that I found your post right after I wrote down my purpose. It was so, I have the chills right now. I knew that I was supposed to start this journey. And so, needless to say, the rest has been magical.
Yes. But before we go into that, and that's the thing, and we need to speak about that because when we were discussing, about the podcast and recording, and I said, Nicole, your journey is so magical and so synchronistic and just out of this world. And the timeline is crazy, even though your Virgo self doesn't think that sometime. Your timeline was like quantum leaping through change. And things are just aligning for you. It's so beautifully and perfectly, and you're so taken care of and protected. And like I said, we'll go into detail. And I was like, I'm almost worried that some people may use your story against themselves because they may feel like they have less of that magic and they crave for that magic and synchronicity and signs, right? And then you told me, you know what, but you need to remember what life I was living, to your point of what you just said, right? I remember in one of the first sessions when you were saying, oh, like this morning when I was running up the hill, and I was like, why are you running up the hill? And you go like... You go like, I just love running up hills. And I was like, why? You go like, I'm just like, I never questioned it. I don't know. I was like, isn't it hard? You were like, yeah. Right? It was like what you said, the hard, the pragmatic, the like, don't question, go, 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 do you. And you did not have the magic before. Can you expand a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's really important, this part, because I do think that I really want to honor what you said. when someone talks about magic happening in their life and your life is hard and you're experiencing hardship and you're like, oh, come on. I was that person. Okay. I had no income supporting a sick child, and people would say things like they would quote Abraham Hicks to me, and I would just be like, are you kidding me right now, people? Like, and I also look back on her. She was not ready. She was not ready to hear it. You only receive messages when you are ready to hear them. And in that moment, for whatever purpose, I was not ready to know that my thoughts were so powerful, that I was programmed and conditioned by so many things, ancestral trauma. I mean, so many things. So at that moment, I wasn't ready. And if you're not ready, you're not ready. It's not the time to
Yes, we
try
need
to
to honor
force it down your throat. Like, it's okay. You'll be ready. Right. But I will say, I did not see the magic. I had flashes of it. I am an intuitive. As I've gone on this journey, I look back and now I understand that moments of where I thought I was crazy, basically, were deep moments of intuition. I never felt like I fit in anywhere. Even when I did fit in, I didn't feel like I fit in. I don't fit in the corporate world in many ways. I do in some, but I have a feeling that it's misaligned, that I don't fit there. And I think I was just in this mentality of scarcity for so long that it's almost like I had to experience that for the expansive feeling to happen. Like, the contraction and the suffering was so big that the next stage of understanding that and opening up is so expansive. And I want to give people hope because, there is an expansion ahead. There is an expansion ahead. So, like, the contraction in my life was a long time. It was an endurance challenge. It was uphill running. I still run uphill. I don't know. Like, there's like this warrior in me that, like, I'm conditioned for battle in some ways. And that helps me spiritually now in some ways.
Yeah.
But I think that I was so mired in trying to survive, and I was not concerned with thriving. Thriving was a mystery to me. I would look at people thriving and go, what have I done wrong? I internalized like this shame. Like, I must have done something wrong because I can't achieve that. And I am not seeing that in my life. And these people are owning houses and they're going on vacations. And here I am with my kids trying to feed them, what is wrong with me? This capitalism and patriarchy will really mess you up if you start subscribing to that as your sense of value. So what I will say is, I don't know how the mystery of life works, but this last year was my time to undo and start undoing a lot of the suffering and struggle in my life. And if magic can happen to me, and it can happen to you, I promise.
I love that. Thank you for talking about that, because I think a lot of us can or could, past versions of us can relate to the scarcity and the messaging that we constantly receive, right? And being triggered by people who are doing well and then making it mean that I'm doing something wrong, like yourself, right? It's a little bit like when you were talking about looking at other people who are thriving or succeeding or being triggered sometimes by your rich friends and be like, well, why did not happen to me? Like, right. And that reminds me of like when people have, I don't know, chronic depression. I hear that a lot when they say, I look at other people smiling and happy, and I'd be like, I wonder what that feels like. I have no access to that.
Absolutely. That was me. I had moments of joy and happiness, but I felt like it was all uphill. I felt like Sisyphus. It was just like constantly pushing it up the hill for a long time.
Right. Yeah. So thank you for emphasizing that, because I think like a lot of people need to hear that before we move into the magical part of the podcast. Buckle up, people. So I think where we started the journey, and I kind of want to talk about that. We started the journey with, first you said, listen, obviously it's very clear this career is misaligned. I need to do something that feels different. So we started doing a little bit of analysis, having conversations. And the first thing that came up was photography and your art. Like that was a big part of your self-expression. And the way that we usually approach the change, we always start with things that we know. So for you, one of the things we already knew that photography was a big part of your life.
Right.
And I remember asking you to start trying it on for size for a potential career path, whether it's a portfolio career, meaning it could be one of your like paths, or it's the career. And I remember that you felt so much resistance. And we had a couple of coaching sessions on that where you would be like, well, I'm not entirely sure, something feels off. And while there were things to clear up, which is, your experience with your teacher, like you had a little bit of that, unpleasant feeling of how your male teacher was accepting, say, your gift, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah.
There was a little
Yes.
bit of that to clear. But in general, you would keep on coming back and say like, well, but it's my expression. Like, I don't feel good about putting it out there. There's something that is off. And
Yeah.
what you told me as well is that there was so much pull and almost like, how do we say that? Like it was, we were conditioned to think like, oh, if you like photography, you should become a photographer. And that is what people do. And that is what you saw your friends do. Talk to me about that part and the resistance and your experience with it.
Yeah. I am a photographer. I'm going to say that first, but I'm a million things. And part of what we're talking about here is that I had role models around me that are photographers. Like that's what they are. That's their passion and that's their career. And I found out I had a gift for it. And part of my intuition with the world is I see it through photography, part of it. But part of the challenge we were having with that is that I have this very pragmatic, once again, here comes that word, this kind of idea that you're supposed to be something, right? Like I told you sometimes I listen to NPR and wish I was one of these people that like dedicated their whole life to studying butterflies or something. I'm like, what? That's amazing. I wish I could do something like that, So I had this kind of idea in my head around specializing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that it's because I'm the opposite of that I look at people like that with a lot of admiration and think, oh gosh, I really aspire to that. But what I learned to do is say, I am an expansive being and I do many, many things. And they don't define me. I define them. So the photography piece was like, it was confusing for me because in many ways I wanted to be a photographer, but I didn't enjoy certain pieces of it. I don't enjoy the editing, the post process with photography. I'm not necessarily into that. I see the vision, I take the photo, I share the photo in my way. But when it came to like trying that on as a career, it just was like, I don't know, no, that's not it. It's always going to be part of what I'm doing. It's my art form. It's present with me all the time. And I love sharing my art and I love doing certain things with it. But I think that it was so important we work through that because I realized I was limiting myself to being a specialist. And it's just not the path for me to be a specialist in that way. It had to be a more intuitive situation or something more of service than just being a photographer. So it's part of my expansiveness, but it's not a defined career for me.
And it's so good. Like you said, it's so good to acknowledge that to yourself because it was kind of looming a little bit on you where like, should I, do I, how do I do it? Right? Like kind of a little bit of that spinning and the energy that was used for that dialogue, that narrative.
Yes. And there's also this important piece to it that when people know you're good at something, they're like, oh, you're going to be a photographer, right? You're doing career coaching because you're going to start doing photography, right? Like, there's this sort of programming we have around that kind of dialogue and that kind of idea of siloing a person based on like something they know they do well. We can do many things well, but that doesn't mean it's going to be our purpose.
Oh, yes. 100%. That's where people get confused because they're like, well, if I'm good at it and people have told me that I'm good at it, I should become a wedding photographer. No. Right? Like, no, that is like death sometimes for people to go down that path. And that's where people get lost and pivot and then come back to square one. Okay. So let's move into the part where you suddenly got clarity about the path that could be your path and your purpose. Before we go there, is there anything else that you wanted to share about the before version of Nicole?
I mean, no, I think we've set the framework. Nicole version was hustling to pay the bills and thinking, I guess I'll just add, I thought a career change was nearly impossible, impractical.
Yeah.
And I was 42, and then there was some feelings around that too. And I would just say, I felt broken in that part of my life. So I guess that's some good context as well. I really did not have a whole lot of hope at that time.
Right. Look at you now. Okay, cool. So, right. So, okay. So let's go into the scene where you came to one of the sessions and you were like, Vilma, I think I kind of got something this morning. I kind of want to talk to you about this. So why don't you share that story?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have to add context to this because I feel like in some ways this is like a reveal here that's a little vulnerable because over the last year, I really started to understand the intuitive aspect of myself. So that it's really powerful. And I was afraid of it because it's woo-woo to a lot of people, or it's like outside of their understanding, or they're afraid of it too. So then it's just easier to write it off as woo-woo, which I don't even like the word woo-woo.
Yeah, me neither.
But no, I don't like that word. But regardless, that's what people call it. So part of my process was I was journaling a lot, but then I do meditation, I work out, and then I sit in the bathtub in the morning, and I love rituals. So I started to make it a ritual where I'd light the candles. And then I started to talk out loud, and I'm not religious, but I would call it prayer. I would say it was very much like prayer. It was speaking my heart, asking for help, asking for guidance. I might cry at this part. And at some point I realized I was guided to do that, and I was not talking to myself. I was talking to what I view as angelic guidance. I experience this as angelic energy, whatever you want to say. We're part of like the light grid. We're part of the magical web. We're part of universal flow. There's a lot of ways to interpret it, but for me, it's very much angels. And I was saying things out loud, like, please help me. And also thanking them, because my life, like I said, became very synchronous. And it was very clear to me I was being guided. It was very clear to me there was presence around me. And so I, at some point, accepted, okay, I'm talking to my angels every morning. And it was a Wednesday and my son was having a very, very difficult week. And I was asking for help. I said, please just help my son this week, make it happen for him this week. And I wasn't saying anything about my purpose, but all of a sudden, basically the fact that I was supposed to be work or do water healing dropped into my body. I don't know how else to explain that. I did not even know what a water healer was. These were not thoughts. It like came into my knowing. It was like lightning bolts. I cried. I had the chills. I was overcome with awareness that something had arrived to me from somewhere else. And it's vulnerable to say this to you and on a podcast because like, I realize how that sounds to other people who haven't had the experience. I really do. And I hadn't had the experience. So I'm sitting there thinking, how am I going to talk to my husband about this? And, how am I going to translate this to anyone else? Because I understood so profoundly in that moment, it was real. It was just so real. And I think in the synchronous aspect of my life, it happened right before my appointment with you. And I knew that it did because you were the person I was going to have to, or going to bring this to, that would understand. So I really honestly can tell you right now, I had never met a water healer. I didn't know what water healing was. I was surprised by it. And I also knew it was true at the same time. So that was a huge moment. Yeah. And then I said to you, so Vilma, was sitting in the bathtub.
You're totally downplaying. It's like, I don't know. And then something like happening. I don't know.
I was trying to figure out how to tell this story. And it was so interesting. It was such an interesting moment in my life.
Yeah, 100%. No, I do remember that. And I do remember that, like, in here we take intuition very seriously. And obviously, like, I knew that that was something, and I felt it too, right? The energy of it. Like, I felt it too in the session when you told me, and I was like, there's something there for you. And it kind of makes sense. And then dots started to connect like little by little, very slowly, because there was a story of your son and the illness and how you would go to, was it the waterfall to spend time with him, right?
Yeah, not only was his illness waterborne.
Oh, it was waterborne?
Yeah, he had, long story, but his 6.5-year illness was waterborne. So, and then we would go to the water, that's where he felt horrible, but that's where he felt okay feeling horrible, was at the creek in nature, flowing water. There were so many aspects of my life that were connected to water. Including my South Node, which is in Pisces. And if you study astrology, that's your past life, oftentimes. So there was just a lot of synchronicity around water in my life that I hadn't really noticed. I hadn't noticed.
That's the thing, because I remember that when we started, because you would come to other sessions and you'd be like, oh my goodness, I was thinking this and this and that. And suddenly, like I said, the dots usually connect backwards, and you started seeing just how important of an element water had been all of your life. Right. And probably there are some unconscious memories, perhaps in the subconscious, that you don't even know, that might have been leading you all the way to this point. Having goosebumps as I say this now. So the water healing came in, and we decided to take it seriously. And we're like, okay, let's sit with this. Let's explore it. Let's honor that. Right. So talk to me what you did next. Do you remember?
Well, I do remember. I didn't know what to do next. I was like, this whole journey has been a surprise for me. And it's not within my normal framework of like planning. So it was a surprise. And you actually helped me do what was next, which was you said, why don't you try initiating yourself? Why don't you find a time where, because I was going to a cabin on a river, and you said, see if it feels right. See if it feels authentic and good to initiate yourself, and find that meaning in that moment. So, I have the chills. So we went to the cabin, and I was and I had a jar to collect water, and I was like, kind of looking for a moment. There was one moment I tried it. I dropped my phone in the river, and
oh my God,
I was like, this is not the right moment. And then I ended up walking around this beautiful place here, and there was there was this beautiful tree, and the roots were flowing into the river, and the river was flowing over the roots. And I was covered in chills. I gathered water there, and I heard the words in my head, I am rooted, but I flow. I have the chills, but I flow. May the water guide me home.
Wow.
And I have the water here behind me. I collected the water, and I knew in that moment, this was it. I mean, like, it did not feel anything but true. And once again, I'm just going to remind people listening, what? Like, I had no idea this would be the thing. I had no idea.
But also, and also I want to honor you that I was thinking, when you said, I journaled back then, before I journaled, and then I saw you, and then I booked the call, and then gave myself time. Like, you showed up all the way through this process, even the times with the weird. And I remember I would even sometimes ask you to change your language, and because you were like, oh, so crazy, so woo woo. I'm like, hold on. You mean it's magic? You mean it's a gift? You mean it's like light? You mean you're supported, right? Because at first there were parts of you that were also like trying to, I don't know, downplay or judge, or almost like we're afraid to believe that this could be true. What was that, like, that part of you that was always kind of be like, like diminishing?
Well, I spent 20 plus years in the corporate world, in a patriarchal world. And, really afraid of my intuitive side,
Mm.
really understanding I never fit because I've always been a free spirit. I've always been a little bit different in certain ways. I'm a chameleon. I can blend in, but inside I always know that about myself. I'm seeing the world in a certain way that I don't feel the people around me see it. And it's not even, I mean, it's not, there's no judgment with that. It's just an understanding that I was getting that messaging a lot. And so it's a defense mechanism, but it's also programming. We're taught to, in some ways, it's the divine feminine or whatever you want to call it, where we are really programmed to downplay the energetic side of life and I call it a light grid. I really do think of it that way. Like we are interconnected and we are in this energetic field and we are taught to ignore it. We are taught to kind of suppress some of the more mystical aspects of life. And I think that I have a stronger masculine energy than some women because it was reinforced over and over again in the corporate environment, in survival, and all of these places where I kind of had to fight. And so I think a lot of that kind of fear of accepting that, okay, I'm finally like, I don't know how to explain it. I guess I'm finally surrendering to these parts of myself. That's kind of scary.
So scary because it's unfamiliar.
It's unfamiliar and it's I guess just the greater culture has a hard time with it. The greater culture has a hard time with it. So I think that's where it came from. And that's also habitual. You know, as humans, we have habits.
Yeah.
And so it was getting rid of that habit as well.
Right. And also I love what you said is about us as women. We tend to downplay either our femininity because we need to like, you know, fit in the corporate, but also our power.
Yeah. It's complicated, right? So there's a lot of complexity to that aspect as well. So I think it's been this year has really been a deprogramming in many ways.
Yes, 100%. Okay. So we found water healing. And then I think what we decided that you'll be doing, the initiation, thank you for reminding about that. I forgot. And then I think what we agreed that what you'll be doing is you'll being more intentional and doing some research on water healing, right? So we had this beautiful, I'm like such a helicopter coach. We had this beautiful experience in a bathtub.
We did.
We did. Right. And then we're like, okay, let's bring it to the 3D and let's see what's out there. Just do the research. And then eventually that led you to the modality that I want you to talk about. So talk to me how you found it and all the beautiful signs and synchronicities that were happening along the way and still are present in your life.
Okay. Yeah, that's big. So I first started searching and was like, no, this isn't, I wasn't finding stuff. I just didn't know what to search for. It was like not a lot of stuff coming up for me. I found one woman that I really identified with. I was covered in chills when I read about her. And she's a water healer. And so I was like, okay, this kind of looks like something that resonates with me. I feel a connection to her. And that was my first kind of preview into what was going to happen, but I didn't know it, which is why connecting the dots backwards is so fun. So I kind of, the other part I will just add here is hard because you can't rush this kind of stuff. So, and I'm a very action oriented person. So I'm like, this is just not, I had some doubts because it was like, I don't know what this is.
And by the way, can I just sorry to interrupt you? That was not happening fast enough. That was literally a matter of like 2 weeks probably when she felt like it wasn't coming through quick enough.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I feel so seen.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really true. So I ended up searching again. I was like, okay, I'm going to really just look into this. And I found Watsu. Watsu is a water form of shiatsu massage in some ways. It's just this healing water modality where you're holding another person. It's very gentle. It's beautiful. I don't know how else to explain Watsu besides it's emotional healing, it's physical healing, it's learning to be held by another person. You kind of exit yourself when you're experiencing Watsu. It's a very energetic practice.
Can you explain what that physically looks like for those who don't know? Because I wasn't aware of this practice either, of this modality. Like,
So
what
what
does
it
it look
physically,
like? Yeah.
like what it actually looks like
Like
to
what it
be.
actually looks like to receive Watsu or to give Watsu. Like what is physically happening?
Right. So if you can picture, so there's a practitioner that is holding you in the water. So you're basically holding you like a baby in their arms in the water to begin.
Mhm.
And then they are slowly moving you through different moves in the water that are beneficial to your body, to your emotional chakras, to, just to your whole being. And it's just this very gentle, slow moving practice in the water, being held and guided by another person while you have your eyes closed, while you're basically, you could be in a meditative state. Many people go into a meditative state, but it's a very intimate practice. Actually, it
Yeah.
might look strange to someone that is seeing it for the first time, because it is an adult holding another adult, often in this very intimate way, as they move through these different slow moves. So I feel like I'm underrepresenting it a little bit, but that's the general premise of Watsu.
Mm.
So, and there's so much behind it that is so beautiful and so healing and so,
It sounds
um,
healing. I can sense the energy. It sounds so healing and also a little bit terrifying for someone, I think, who has intimacy issues or abandonment or like that, like early childhood trauma, right? That comes with connection, that has to do with connection.
I think it very much benefits those folks the most
Well, it's
because,
always like that, right? The thing that we
yeah,
exist.
I mean, I think that absolutely it would be terrifying. But if you think of someone like an elderly person who lives alone and is never held, and their body hurts, it's a place where you can be weightless and you can be
Mhm.
held by someone. If you think of someone who might be disabled and someone can't reach certain parts of their body if they're in a wheelchair, if you think of someone that has gone through a breakup and is struggling with emotion and feeling safe, there's a lot of safety to it. There's a lot of feeling of being,
Yeah.
because I guess for me, I always understand our bodies are heavy. We're dense, right? Like we hold weight, and that weight also holds emotion. And so for me, when I'm in the water being given Watsu, I exit. There's no, because the
Mm.
water's warm for Watsu. So it's your body temperature and you're weightless. So you really lose this, you know, awareness of your body, and you're able to be in a different space. Then, I mean, I feel like I just exit. I'm not there. So I think that it really, I guess, it's a really beautiful practice as far as that, as well as leaving maybe the woes or the weight of your body. So that's another benefit of it. It's just, if you look at Watsu, it's someone holding another person in the water very gently, very slowly, moving them through a series of moves for an hour, oftentimes.
Mhm.
So I see Watsu online, and once again, another surprise. I was like, I have to learn this. I
Mm. Yeah,
have to
you
learn.
had a knowing, right? Like I need to find a way to experience that or learn it.
Yeah, right. I was like, just I have to learn Watsu. I don't know why. That was it. It was like, I have to learn Watsu. So it was like, I was looking, and everything seemed to be in Europe or New Zealand or far away from where I live. And I was like, okay, well, I'll try to figure this out. Right. And then all of a sudden I find out one of the best instructors in the world lives 2 hours from me.
Wow.
And I got nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so close to home. I was thrilled. I was like, okay, I'm really going
I
to
think I'm
figure
gonna
out.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like, okay, I think I'm going to do this. So I called her and we had this lovely conversation, and I said, I really just found out about this, and I want to know if it's okay if I show up for your Watsu One class. And she was like, absolutely. And we had a long talk about it. It was a beautiful talk. Her name is Mary. She's a wonderful woman. And just as another message about purpose, it was the week of my vacation, the week long training for Watsu 1 was the week of my vacation. And I also was able to have it paid for through training funds at my employer.
This is the wildest one. This is the wild one because, one of the reframes I always used to give you, right, about your current job is like it pays for your new career, and your job literally paid for the beginning of the new career.
It really did. And it was all so aligned. It was like, I found Watsu. I found Mary. Mary's 2 hours away. The training is on my vacation week. It is paid for. It is done. Right. It was just like, it was like finding you. It all just, when you are paying attention, all you have to do is really show up. You just show up in gentle ways though. You don't have to be Sisyphus. You don't have to like run up the hill every day. It really, if you show up for it, that's the hard thing to explain to people that haven't seen it yet, is it will appear. And when it appears, it all fits. It fits so beautifully. So it fits. And I went to Watsu 1 and I met all of these people that are divine people in my life now. I feel like Mary is another teacher in my life that was destined to happen. And I had a terrifying moment in the middle. I mean, like here I am working in tech and I'm in a pool. We're all in our swimsuits all week, and you're like getting in the pool and you're holding people in these intimate like ways, and you are responsible for them in the water. You're responsible for their well-being in the water, and you want them to feel comfortable and you feel their energy. And it was so much. It was so much. And so it was like day 2, I froze. I had a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Can I do this? This feels so overwhelming. I was stuck in my head. Mary read the energy, took me aside, and she said, I will never forget this, because she said, do you have an issue with transitions in your life? A hard time with transitions. I was like, yeah, I do. She's like, yeah, same thing in the pool. It carries over in the pool, because anytime I was crossing my meridian and trying to change to an opposite side or transition into another thing, I was almost freezing. And she just said, just let the person float. Just let the water do the job. Just come back into your body, come back into your energy. And don't get so stuck in your head. And I realized in that moment, it's like, these things are kind of, like you say, you're designed for whatever it is that you end up doing.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about it. Yeah, go on. Mm-hmm.
This practice is what I need. And, by doing what I need for myself, I'm giving what other people need in the practice. And I'm able to further give myself to the practice, because I realize it's such a reciprocal situation. And I feel so overcome with the awareness that I needed Watsu.
I love that. And I think, like, I don't know if it was after Watsu 1, the first experience, a bit later, I think you and I were also like just marveling at the fact how, I always say is like, when we find our aligned path, our purpose, we realize how we were literally designed to walk that path. Everything about us, every experience has been preparing us to embody that. And I think for you, even down to, we would laugh because you would always say, like, I have a very strong physical body and like, I've always been like this, even that aspect, or your intensity, how sometimes you would say, like, I'm just a very intense person. I was like, well, isn't that exactly what helps you to be present and like strong and really connected in Watsu?
Yeah, I think it's so one of the like puzzle pieces I haven't been able to figure out before this was like, I don't want to be in front of a computer. I don't want to sit down all day. I don't want to be doing these indoor things all the time. I am so much a forest fairy. I just want to frolic around, and I'm physical and I like to move, and I'm constantly doing things. I want to do yoga. I want to dance. I want to run. So it was like, but that's not the way capitalism works. That's not what I've been trained to do. So yes, I was provided by spirit, or however you want to look at this, a modality that is in my body and requires the use of my body, but in a very gentle way. My strength comes into play and is helpful, but my strength has to be gentle. It has to be mindful. It has to be very much connected and to the person I am focusing on. And the focus is, what does this body need? So, I'm holding a person trying to understand what their body needs. And I just want to remind people listening, I was in a Watsu class with body workers. They knew all the words. They knew everything they were doing as far as where they were touching, what the purpose at certain points were with the body. I didn't know any of that.
It takes a
And
lot
I
of
felt
courage to be a beginner the way that you showed up there.
it takes so much courage. And yet I knew I was supposed to be there. And I knew that I was supposed to be a beginner there. And I knew it was like so funny. Like, I just like I can learn that. I will learn that right now. I don't.
Yes. That's another sign when you're on the right track. We're like, well, there are a lot of obstacles, but I can figure it out. And can you also share what Mary, your teacher, said to you? I think she also said that on day 2 or whatever at the very beginning, that she felt like you would be really good at this. I can't recall the exact wording.
She did. She said at I think it was a couple days in, she's like, I can see a gift. You just need to get out of your head, but she could read it. She saw it. She still has encouraged me through all of this. And I think I think there was an understanding within myself, with Mary, even my husband, that it all just was supposed to be there. I was supposed to be there, and it worked for me. And that energy is kind of undeniable when it happens.
100%.
Yeah.
Can you share with the listeners, like, this is kind of fast forward and we'll come back at the synchronicities, because I really want you to share about the synchronicities and signs. But can you share with the listeners? Because I get that question a lot when people are like, what is it like when you are like really aligned with something? What does it feel like? Because like some people never felt that, just like you and I had not felt that before we found our path. What does it feel like to embody and be in the energy of that purpose?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question because I have not felt it.
Hmm.
It is undeniable bliss.
Hmm.
It's self-liberation. You feel like you can, I mean, okay, I'm going to try to put it into words. Sometimes I feel it and I can't explain it as well. But when I do go to Watsu practice, am around other people that are doing Watsu with me, I believe everything is possible.
Mm.
I know that everything is right where it should be. I know that this is my path and it will happen. I think that's important to say because I'm not there yet. I'm still learning. I still have more to do, quite a bit more to do. There's a good amount of requirements to be able to be a practitioner. So I have quite a bit more to do, but I know I will do it. Now, like if you had asked me this about something else, I would find a million reasons, that it might not have. I know it will because it's undeniable that it is what I'm supposed to do. So that is, and I would say like I think I messaged you one time because I went to meet other people. I found a teacher in town, which is a whole other chapter of magic, but there's one pool where you can do Watsu in my town. And I met this wonderful woman here that I am working with who teaches, and now I'm going to be practicing in that pool with people. And I went to meet people here in my area that are learning, and I just went to sit with them and meet them. And when I left, I felt like I was on a cloud for hours. I was like walking, smiling, walking the dog with like this huge, goofy grin on my face, and understanding that there is no other feeling like it. There just really is no other feeling like it. So that is the magic I was talking about at the beginning, where I didn't know that was possible. And I was so stuck in that wheel for so long of survival that now that I've had the feeling, and now that I know this, and now that I have these people in my life on this path with me. I know that it's all going to unfold, and I'm not in a hurry, which is a really amazing statement for me.
Yes.
Yes, because it's like, I can't rush it. I have to go through a certain amount of courses. I have to get a license to touch here in the States. There's no rushing it. So, and it's funny when I say that, that's totally okay with me. There's no rushing it. I totally trust it will all happen, when it's supposed to happen. Yeah. And it also kind of removes the pressure from the other side of my life, because I'm still working my corporate job, but it removes this idea that I know what's going to happen. I did not know Watsu was going to happen. I did not know any of this was going to happen. And so I have to apply that everywhere. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. This could happen faster, could happen slower. A million things could unfold. And so I've kind of just let go, like, okay, all of these things are kind of just like falling into place in their own way. And I'm surrendering.
Right. And I want to talk about that a little bit as well, because, like you mentioned some of the patterns that you had, because you had no choice but to be the provider, the warrior, the hustler, right? Who always had to be there to take care of the safety and whatever financial needs of your family and your beautiful sons. And then at the beginning, when we were sort of stepping into that process, there were moments when you would really struggle with that part, which you really wanted to control, really wanted to know the answers, who really did not like what you would say, just standing in front of the computer, right? We can talk about let's move into maybe synchronicities. And the reason how I want to connect that is that there are still days and times where probably much less than if we were compared to the beginning, where you will struggle with accepting the reality of your current life and you just want to be in the purpose. But the current reality is like, we want to be financially responsible, strategic. And that means that you will keep this job for the time being, right? Or maybe find a transitional job, doesn't matter, but you will stay in this world. But now at least you have the direction and knowing where you're going. But sometimes, like we laugh, you and I, the matrix just takes over and suddenly you like forget, or you get really sort of plugged into it. And you're like, oh my God, I really do want to be here. Like, it's such a struggle. And I feel like in those darkest moments, every single time, and not only just those moments, you would get so many signs from the universe to reassure you that you are exactly where you're supposed to be and you're being so supported. Share some of the signs with the listeners that you've been regularly inundated with, or like wherever you go.
Yeah, this is like a whole other podcast episode. So I will say really fast, I do have, I want to emphasize that I have moments, because it's important to know this is not a perfect journey. Like, I'm still working in a corporate job and I'm in a sector that's not doing well. There's uncertainty about the tech sector right now. So my job has changed, and there are moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to continue to do this? Or this feels dark and heavy. It may be more so sometimes because the expansion, like once again, we talk about expansion and contraction. The expansion into Watsu is massive. So I have this place where I'm like, woo, I'm floating, and I'm literally floating, and I'm doing all of these wonderful things. And then work feels very, very misaligned. Though I will say I have learned to understand and appreciate it in a different way, because it is supporting my purpose. It is helping me. My purpose is helping me be more fluid in that job. And my purpose is helping me accept more things about it than, before, when I didn't have anything else, that was helping me like move through it. So I think now I feel like this is serving a really important purpose right now. It's just not aligned. But the synchronicity for me is daily. I'm trying to think of it's just part of my life. Like I walk outside and there it is, every day. I have so many synchronicities. I don't even know how to count them. Like there is a homeless man I see everywhere, no matter the time of day. No matter when I go out, run, walk, go to the store, he's present pretty much every time. My husband goes on the same routes and does not see him.
Wow.
He appears at interesting times too. There's like an interest, and he also appears in tandem with another synchronicity, which is a license plate that drives by right before I see him. There are other like numeric synchronicities I see everywhere. I have things like, there's a lot of things where I will read something and hear something at the same time, or think something and hear something at the same time. I'll think of someone, they'll call me. It's, once again, if we use the word woo woo, it's something I don't talk about a lot because I know it's true and I experience it and I understand it. And I will say, the more you see it, the more you thank it, the more you acknowledge it is part of a mystery we were all part of, the more it happens. It just happens more.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'll give you a little example that's just a small one. We are going on our honeymoon finally, 4.5 years after getting married. And it was kind of a stretch for us to do it, and we're excited to go. But I was in my head thinking about all of these pragmatic things about going on this honeymoon to Hawaii, which is not that far off. And so I was stuck in kind of these thoughts, and I look up and the license plate, or not the license plate, but the bumper sticker in front of my face said "Practice Aloha."
Oh my God. I love that.
That was just like 2 days ago. And I was like, isn't it delightful? Like, I thank it every time. Like, isn't it magical? Isn't it delightful to know we are in this, not matrix. I like light grid, but we're in this world with this mystery surrounding us, but we know we're connected to it. And if you know you're connected to it and affirm you're connected to it, it wants to keep showing you.
Right. I love that. And also just to share with the listeners, I think it's not only that, what you mentioned, I think it's also that how often you get them, like literally multiple times a day. You're like always, so I think there was hummingbirds, right? That you had mentioned as well. Like that hummingbird would fly up to you. And like, that is definitely one of the big signs for you. And like how, especially at the times, I think that you would feel a little in despair, or like you would go back to the old ways, or like, because we're flip-flopping in belief. And that's very normal when we're readjusting to the new way of being and relating to the world, especially the purpose-led life. It's normal to go back and forth. That liminal space or that cognitive dissonance that you experience between these two paths is very real right now. And you would always share with me that in those darker moments, like the signs would be there, like to pick you up, to support you, to remind you this is exactly where you're supposed to be.
It's so wild. Yes, it's exactly true. Like at any time I feel doubt, they bombard me. I'm bombarded with signs and alignment. But I think it's a fascinating aspect of being alive. And I love seeing the world this way because, the other option is to just be like, oh, yeah, it's a coincidence, Yeah. It's a coincidence. But I don't even know if I believe in that word.
Oh, right. I don't. I totally don't. I don't think anything is a coincidence. That's for sure. And I feel like with you is like, I think that's a good invitation for the listeners as well to, if you feel like what Nicole said at the beginning of the episode, where like, I don't know what was magic. I don't know, like, right. To invite that in and start acknowledging it. On that note, maybe changing gears a little bit, talk a little bit about what you mentioned briefly, but I think it's a very beautiful aspect of, again, embracing an aligned career, which is you need to reframe your relationship with inner masculine and inner feminine, right? So you said that for you, the masculine was kind of taking over because it had to be the provider and so on and so forth. What this journey has taught you so far, like, because you've been through trials and tribulations and things at work, is to really embrace more of the feminine of surrender, acceptance, and receiving, which at first was very hard for you when you would receive free time at work. You would receive like empty calendars. And it was really hard for the masculine to accept that and be like, well, what do I do with it? But, the message was not about doing, it's about trusting and receiving. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yes. I will first frame that I think masculine energy for me is very much attributing worth to doing and asserting your sort of power in a certain way. And I didn't understand that a lot of my belief system was tied into doing, pushing, strength, physical strength, even in some ways, and getting results. So it was interesting because I guess in some ways I knew I was an alpha female, if we want to go that route, but it it was interesting for me to start to, I really identify how programmed I was like that. I also have I'm inherently a little bit like that. So, but I think I kind of over indexed because I was in this corporate world. So it really was this understanding that probably the most meaningful, powerful things cannot be forced. They have to be experienced. You have to receive, surrender, let go, not know, let go. Letting go is hard. Also, remember there was an eclipse and I was in deep grief and I was grieving the woman I was. I couldn't figure out why I felt it was like a death. I felt like I was grieving death. And I realized in this moment that I was grieving this warrior, fighting, doing woman that I had to be in some way for a long time and that I was. And I really appreciate her. She got me through a lot. She raised my sons are wonderful people. She raised these sons and got them through things that were really difficult. And yet it's not the way now. And so I was really just kind of appreciating her, letting her go and feeling so sad for her. There was so much sadness and loneliness in some of those experiences. And by letting her go, I started to realize I had really arrived to this new chapter of life where it's softer. There's more peace.
Yeah.
It's gentler. And there's kind of this more gentle maternal energy now in my life. I had pushed myself in some ways to suppress it.
Yes.
In certain ways that would seem like I was being a woman that was too much, like you're too much. There were places where I was trying to quiet her, and there were places where I was overexerting, where I was like, maybe being a little bit too loud, so to speak, or too aggressive when it was just a time to observe or a time to let go or a time to experience. So it's still something I am observing about myself and letting go of.
Right. Because it's hard, like for the Virgo, for the controlling pieces. I think it was for you, probably that was one of the biggest challenges, that together with accepting the, current corporate reality and really embracing and understanding how to reframe and, use all these different tools to really help you. I have no idea how the time just passed. I just looked at the I have no idea. Literally, it feels like 5 minutes. I hope it's going to be the same for the listeners. Well, if not, we enjoyed this. I wanna wrap up with asking you the question that I always ask career changers who come here on the podcast is, what is the advice or several pieces of advice that you'd like to give your past self, your past Nicole, who was about to embark on a journey, and also to anyone else who is maybe at the place where you were at before embracing the magic and experiencing this beautiful unfolding in the last 6, 7, 8 months? I don't know how long it was. What is the advice?
Yeah, I love that. I would tell former Nicole, ask for help, Nicole. Ask for help. We need others to offer us perspective. Our minds are busy places. Our lives are busy places. We lose perspective. So we really need a coach. We really need someone. We really need Vilma, everyone.
Okay, you guys, I already told that to Nicole. I was like, I really tell my clients, you don't need to say that.
I was totally coached. No, I'm just kidding. But I really do believe that. I tell other people that you want to make a big change in your life, get a coach, because you pushed me through things that I really didn't want to do at times. Like there were times where I felt doubt, or there were times I felt afraid. And you really grounded me through a lot of change in this past year. So ask for help. The other thing I will say is ask for help, but then remember that only you can liberate yourself.
Yes.
So you are your own liberator. No one else's ideas, desires, resources, energy they're not going to come in and save you. You have to liberate yourself. So having said that, I would say be audacious and courageous enough to believe that your success is inevitable on this path.
Yes.
You get two choices. You can believe it or not, right? Like there's no in between. And I used at the beginning of this, I thought it was like outrageous. I thought that was outrageous.
So responsible.
But now I say my success is inevitable.
Yes.
And the choices you make once you say it are different. The way you feel when you say it is different. When you really, really are courageous enough to declare it to the universe is listening. It's not going to come and rush into your life tomorrow, but it's building. So I would say just be courageous enough to care about yourself enough to believe in your own success and believe that your success is inevitable. And then lastly, I would say try to adjust your expectations to expect a meaningful journey rather than a desired outcome. Because this career journey is really just a portal or like an entryway into all of the other places within you. So you're going to look at all of these things you didn't think you were going to look at. And there's all of these things that are going to come up. It's really, it's like career journey, purpose journey, but it's really life journey. It's really
life journey.
It's life journey. So it's going to be a meaningful, surprising. I mean, if there's ever been a surprising journey, just look at me. I didn't expect to learn Watsu and know that this is my path. So expect it to be meaningful, surprising, and let go of the outcome. But remember that your success is inevitable, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah. And redefine what success is to you, right? Because maybe what you thought success was in the past may look a little bit different. So being open to that. And the final one I want to add, this is like, I'm interviewing myself now. The final one I want to, hey, it's my podcast. I can do that. The final one I want to add to reiterate what you said, just show up. So many people have this burning desire and yearning, and they keep on saying no to themselves. And that like breaks my heart. Just show up.
Can I add to that,
yes.
to the show up? Okay. What I have learned for sure over this last year is if I show up, everything else shows up.
Oh,
I am not doing huge, I'm not making huge efforts. Sure, I'm making efforts, but the efforts are showing up. And then the people show up. And then the things show up. And then the next thing shows up. But it's not, you know that you're doing it and you're focusing on yourself and you're doing the work you need to do when you show up and then the next thing shows up. And it's never going to end. It doesn't there's not like a cutoff date where this is going to end. So I would say, don't think of showing up as like a big, huge, long to-do list of all of these things you have to accomplish. It can be just the easiest thing that you show up for. As long as you are putting that energy forward and doing it, it's going to show up for you.
Yes. Amen. That was perfect. That was so perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, Nicole. It's such an honor to have you on the podcast. I really am dreaming of receiving Watsu from you one day. So I'm sure that once we put that to the universe, it's going to happen. And I can't wait to witness your journey and see how it will unfold. I know you're going to help so many people and serve and heal so many people. And you're finally embracing that energy that I saw in the first session. And I'm like, okay, we're finally aligning. The dissonance is becoming smaller and smaller. And I'm just so honored to have been in this journey, to have supported you. And thank you for your beautiful light.
Oh, I'm such a Vilma fan. Thank you so much, Vilma. You are such a light in the world.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you for being here. And to the listeners, thank you for listening. And I'll connect with you soon. Bye. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you'd like to take this work further and have my one-on-one support in changing careers using my easy holistic process, head over to the show notes and book your consultation call to be added to the waiting list to work together. Can't wait to meet you.